Alrighty, so this morning I made and posted a video that was more directed toward the trans feminine end of the gender spectrum, and I wanted to also address the same issue for those who are trans masculine, because I mean it's also an issue for y'all. And this is the kind of like hyper focus and or obsession in a harmful way about transition results or hormone levels and things of that nature. And I don't mean simply curiosity or wondering if you're doing good. I mean like literally you could be presented with all the evidence in the world that you are transitioning in a normal paced manner, but yet you have this inner anxiety and fear that tells you you are not. And so you hyper focus on, what is my dose? What are my levels? You know, am I looking in the mirror and I see feminine features? Am I bringing out that face hair quick enough? Is my body hair getting on there? You know, all this stuff. If you're hyper focusing on these things to the point that it's a detriment and it's causing anxiety or fear or something like that in you, this is a problem. And it's a very real problem that a lot of people experience. It tends to dominate most of the trans feminine individuals, but there are still quite a number of trans masculine individuals that it affects. I would say for trans femme folks, it's probably up to 80% of them experience this. For trans masculine folks, it's probably more like 40 or 50%, which is still quite a large amount. And so what I find is that, you know, you start hormone therapy. Usually the first few months you're pretty excited and that gets you through the worry. Like the worry doesn't really surface that much because it's new, it's exciting and everything. And usually those first 6 months, like you see a lot of changes really fast for most folks, but not all. Everybody is totally different and genetically predisposed towards different ways of transitioning. And so you have to keep in mind that, you know, one, if you experience some transitional changes really fast up front, eventually the body can't keep that up. You know, unless it's a tumor, the body can't keep up a rate of growth that is just exceptionally fast. Most people are going to experience a kind of it'll feel like a plateau, but it's like a plateau that will slowly be working its way up through your transitional process. But many people are very concerned over this, so you are not alone in your concern, for sure. You're definitely not the first that has had these questions and this anxiety and everything, and it is important to communicate this with your healthcare provider. They should not poo-poo you, you know, it's not, you know, a concern, your levels are fine, what are you asking for? Like, really and truly, this is something that it gets in your head, and it basically lives there. And I mean, like, you could have the most masculine body ever, you know, super muscles and super beard out to here, you know, like you can't even look in the freaking camera, it's pushing it over, your beard's so big, you know, all this stuff. And you could have like a voice so deep we can't even hear you, but you still think that something's wrong. And this is awful. It really is. And it lives in your head, and I'm not telling you that you're not having a real problem, that it's all in your mind or anything like that. God, no. This is a very real issue that is not occurring physically. Like, it's literally society's expectations in your head making you think these things that are very derogatory towards yourself. So number one, please don't think that I'm shaming or chastising or anything, or saying that it's all in your head and it's not real. That is not what I'm meaning at all. What I'm meaning to let you know is that many people experience this. You're not alone. And that it's a very real issue that stems from a psychological source, but I couldn't think of the word, sorry. But it stems from a psychological source, and it's much like PTSD. So we have society's expectations of what a man should be and all this other crap. And that really gets in there to where anything that's perceived as perhaps feminine would then be negative, you know? And I mean, I don't know if you've seen cis men out there, you know, walking around in a pink shirt or whatever, stylish hair and stuff. These are things that are also considered, you know, feminine, but yet some of these cis guys don't seem to have a problem expressing it, but yet we'll have some trans guys who really feel like affronted if they, see that on themselves because they think it's taking a step back. It is not. That's society putting that in your head. And I mean, if you're uncomfortable in a pink shirt, you're uncomfortable. I'm like, I don't like pink. But you get my point. It's just that you perceive some things as being negative when it really shouldn't be negative. It should just be like, oh, that's not my thing, But instead it gets internalized as this negative experience to where it's hard to move past, and you just focus on it. Oh gosh, what if I colored my hair blonde? Do I look pretty? If I color my hair blonde, am I now a pretty guy? Well, you know what? There are tons of pretty guys. Like, that's just a thing, It doesn't mean it's bad. Now, if it's not your particular thing, okay, well, whatever. Do some stuff to make yourself a little more rugged. Get that weird, patchy crap that people do with their beards sometimes, whenever you grow in a beard. Like, you may not have one right now, but eventually you would, and you can make it look rugged or whatever. But I mean, don't see every little thing that is feminine-esque or labeled feminine by society as a negative thing. This is not a step backward for you. This is not something that means you're not man enough. That's complete trash. That's just society. Anyone who tells you that is not being a friend. They're just a shit stirrer. And I see a lot of that on like Reddit and everything, and people will be like, oh, if you haven't had your voice drop, by now, well then you're just never gonna succeed. And okay, I know that like voice dropping is a major thing, and it does occur for most people, but also there are plenty of cis guys who do not have a very masculine, quote unquote, voice. And there are many cis women, like myself included, who I do not have a traditionally feminine voice. It's not necessarily masculine either, but it's not pleasing to the ear if someone is listening for a feminine voice. So I mean, there's all of these outliers out there, so it's not like you're failing. You don't have to have this certain voice, this certain beard, this certain body type and all this. Certainly we all have our likes and dislikes, but when it comes to anatomy, you can't pick and choose. I mean, if I could pick and choose my anatomy, well, then I would probably be a little bit lighter, not rail thin, but a little bit lighter so I could fit into some of the other clothes that I have. But I can't pick and choose that. I can work towards it and try to change things. But I mean, if my goal was to look like one of those, like, tall, long Victoria's Secret models, I'm probably shit out of luck because I'm 5'2", for one. I don't have that kind of a long torso, and my legs are short and stubby. So, I can want all I fucking want to look like that. It ain't ever gonna happen. And the same thing can go with transition. I mean, you can't pick what your genes are gonna allow you to have. Now, there are certain ways you can modify hormone therapy if someone's having problems. In certain labs you can check just in case. Like, I mean, if you have a little bit more fluff on you, for example, your healthcare provider, if you're having problems, may want to check like an SHBG and an estrogen panel on you, just to make sure, one, that you're not over-converting testosterone into estrogen, which does happen. I've discussed that in other videos. And also that you're not overproducing SHBG, which is your sex hormone binding globulin. It's one of the carriers that carries these sex hormones throughout the body. But one of the things that can happen with it is if you have like a ton of it, it may be holding on to the testosterone a little bit too much, and so it's not getting good effects. Or you could have a low SHBG, and then, if you have a low SHBG, then you're not going to get your T to go to where it needs to go. So, I mean, if you're having problems and you have a little bit of extra woohoo fluff like myself on you, then SHBG can have these issues. Folks with a little less fluff on them can have that issue. It's just less likely. But this is just an example of things that, it can be investigated if you're having problems, and that would be an actual, physical problem. But by and large, the vast majority of folks do not encounter these kind of problems. They're rather rare to see happen. And so whenever you find yourself looking in a mirror and you're like, oh, is my eyebrow looking girly or whatever, whatever kind of thing you're telling yourself that makes you feel less manly, you know, number one, I want you to know that like these things don't change overnight. This is not something like I'll have people say, my face looks more feminine today. No, it looks that way to you, certainly. But to everyone else who has seen the changes that testosterone has wrought, no. Facial fat redistribution takes many, many weeks, months generally, and it takes years to fully form out. Same with body fat redistribution. So it's not something that like, even if you quit taking testosterone cold turkey, that all of a sudden your face is just gonna whoop and look feminine and stuff like that. No. That one is just you seeing it up here from all the bullshit that society has put into your head. The rest of us will continue seeing very male-looking dudes sitting in front of us. So, I mean, I want you to understand that these problems are real. Up here, more so though. And that is 100% a valid problem. It is bullshit from society, and also sometimes from people too. If you've been looking for information out on the internet, and you have some of these people who you never know, they can lie anyway, or they could just be shit stirrers and they like to stir up your anxiety. They see that you're vulnerable and they just like, oh well, let's see what kind of a reaction I can get. So I mean, you have this very valid problem, this PTSD like mental health thing going on, and then these people that will prey off of it. So I mean, pay attention to who you are paying attention to, so to speak, because they can really ruin your day, week, everything, and your mental health. Listening to these fools. Talk to your healthcare provider. Now I know like a lot of healthcare providers don't really like specialize in trans medicine, but I mean, that's definitely a place to start. You can talk to a good friend or a therapist as well. You know, and you can always write to the clinic. Right now, you know, whenever I have time, I answer people's questions. Now, if if at such time I get so busy that I can't answer questions, boy, that'll be the day, but hey, it could happen. But I mean, you know, find somebody you trust, ask them these questions, you know, do some self-research. I'll never shit on people who do self-research. It's just sometimes there is, well, not sometimes, there is a lot of bad info out there. And it's really hard to kind of see past some of the biased studies that they have out there, or the biased people that you have out there who misrepresent their experiences and everything. But anyway, so just so you know, whenever I'm doing masculine hormone therapy, what I'm shooting for, generally speaking, depending on if you're on injections or patches or creams or gels or what have you, the levels that I'm shooting for is usually somewhere between like 350 NGDL up to 1000 NGDL, depending on, like I said, the timing of the draw and what type of therapy you're on. So 350 to 1000 is considered, you know, the normal masculine range for cisgender dudes. And so if I see someone, just for example, with a, I don't know, they're on injections once weekly and their middle of the week level is like 600, that's great. Ooh, we're winning, whatever. Is it, you know, 700, 500, woo, we're winning. It's fine. You know, now one thing I'll say is like testosterone therapy does not suppress estrogen production like how it happens in the opposite effect with feminizing therapy. Feminizing therapy, if you put someone on estrogen that usually produces testosterone as their majority hormone, estrogen will shut down testosterone production, like shut it down. With testosterone therapy, it doesn't quite shut it down all the way, certainly. It usually reduces estrogen production up to about 40% from what it is at baseline. And for some people, it barely affects it at all. And this is fine. It can, not always, but it can cause some issues. But in general, testosterone's effects in the body are very overpowering, as opposed to estrogen's effects. And so even if you have an estrogen level sitting around there that was close to your baseline, usually testosterone is going to be able to just like overwhelm it and take over, and you're still going to get good masculinization. The main issue that comes into play whenever you have an estradiol level that stays close to what your baseline was is going to be the cycle. people who stay close to baseline with their estradiol usually tend to still have a cycle and sometimes even have it regularly. And that's where I call it a problem. If you're still having a cycle regularly and it bothers you, because some people aren't bothered by it, if you're having a regular cycle and it bothers you, then that's a problem that you need to discuss with your healthcare provider. I have a whole other video about masculine menstrual cycles if you're interested in that. But it is not to be considered a failure of masculine therapy, because you will still masculinize just fine. It's just that that particular part down there decided it wasn't going to shut down. And FYI, as long as you have those parts down there, no matter how good your therapy is, no matter how long you're on therapy, there is always the chance that you can have breakthrough cycles here and there, because the parts are there and all it takes is just a little bit of estrogen elevation to a certain point and then a sudden drop off of it, and it can trigger that. But it is not a failure of testosterone therapy. I want to make that clear because a lot of people have that kind of an issue. Now, in 85-90% of transmasculine people on testosterone, it does tend to fully stop the cycle, and then you might have like some cramping on and off here and there. You might have a spotting incident here and there, but essentially it's gone. And then in like 5 to 10% of people, it's kind of just irregular, which is annoying, but you know, if it's only coming once every 3 or 4 months as opposed to once a month, yay. That's a win for me. Like I said, there are some things you can do to help mitigate this if it's a huge problem for you. And I have a whole other video that discusses that, but anyway, just know that it's not a failure of therapy. You can move on with your life from there. Some people will obsess over like hair loss potential from testosterone therapy. That's going to be from DHT, dihydrotestosterone, which is something that testosterone converts into. And in general, that's going to be what's responsible for also for downstairs growth, for facial hair development, and then also the male patterning of the hairline. And so this is something that's very difficult to tiptoe around, because you do need DHT, especially up front in the beginning. Over time it becomes less important, because once you've gone through the changes down there and here, and the voice, oops, sorry, forgot to mention that DHT is important for changes in the vocal range. So once you've had those changes, though, DHT becomes less important, and that's when I would say, okay, if you have a disposition or an actual problem with hair loss at that point, then look into measures like topical Rogaine or something like that to help mitigate that. If you have a genetic predisposition toward a certain hair pattern, I have yet to find anything that actually reliably works for that. If it's not DHT that's causing it and it's just genetics, I haven't seen a product yet that reliably works to help prevent that. And that's one of those things, like if the dudes in your family all have this patch here or whatever, there's a good chance you're just going to have that no matter what you do, as long as you're on masculinizing therapy. If it's DHT, then you can do stuff to help mitigate it. Like I said, like topical Rogaine, which is minoxidil, is the active ingredient. But I would not recommend up front trying things like finasteride, which is a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor. 5-alpha reductase is what is responsible for taking testosterone and converting into dihydrotestosterone, DHT. So, and like I said, DHT in the beginning is important for voice, for facial hair, for bottom growth and stuff like that. You don't necessarily want to prevent it from happening. So it's a rock and a hard place with that. You can't pick and choose some of these things that happen, and it's kind of just taking the luck of the draw and seeing what happens the first couple of years that you go through masculinizing therapy. And once you've gone through it and you have most of your physical changes kind of under your belt, so to speak, you could slow up on your testosterone dose and do more of just maintenance dose that will maintain your changes, but also lower your DHT level, because the lower your testosterone level is, the lower your DHT level is, because remember, all DHT is converted from testosterone, so the more T you have, then the more DHT you can have. So anyways, that's one of those things you just got to kind of navigate and work through on your own. and kind of see what you're comfortable with. But anyways, back to talking about the whole topic of the video. So I do apologize. Like I said, I don't mean to have come off as like chastising or shaming anybody for feeling like, you know, they aren't transitioning appropriately. Certainly, if you feel that way, you need to ask someone, talk to them, get information and everything. But if you find that it's affecting like your daily life and that it's affecting your mental health and stuff, that you're having these kind of like anxieties and hyper focusing and just depression basically over your perceived femaleness, you know, that you're not having enough masculinity, you're having more femininity, that word, anyway. But if you really do think that you're having these more female traits, you should, one, seek confirmation through your lab work, seek confirmation through your healthcare provider and other people who have seen your transition progress, and just kind of go from there. Try to ground yourself and remember that if your lab levels are good, you're doing all the right things, and other people are telling you, I don't see it, dude, you can probably rest assured that it's that whole PTSD thing that society has put in your head that's making you feel bad. And like I said, so many people have this. It doesn't have to be trans related. I mean, shoot, everybody sees what society thinks is the perfect body, and they get this crap in their head. Oh, I'm too fat, I'm too short, I'm too to wear this or to do this dance or to whatever, you know. So we all as a society need to move past this kind of unrealistic expectation that we have for the human body. The human body is wide and varied and diverse and crazy interesting sometimes, but it's also got a brain that can drive us nuts over these things. So anyways, please be kind to yourself and others. I hope this helped somebody. I just really didn't want to leave out the masculine folks, since I did that hellaciously long video for the trans feminine folks about the same topic, and now I made just about as hellaciously long a video about masculine topics and stuff like that. Anyway, hope y'all have a wonderful day. See you later. Bye.